Hello, my name is Mick Connors. I'm with the Madison Area Technical College, Madison College in Madison, Wisconsin. I've been a senior desktop engineer here for several years, but I've been actually working on the Apple platform since about 1984. And back in the early days, I had a manager who was pretty picky over every little thing I did. And back in the day, he would pick up like a notepad and say, "What's this mean?" And so I got used to the fact that everything I wrote down had to be in detail and a lot of explanation behind what it was. Not so easy to do on a sticky note, but he wanted it. And so that's how I learned to be so diligent about my documentation. And that's what we're going to talk about, is what do you document and how we're going to do it, and how do I create my documentation. So with that, let's get into it. So we're going to look at what to document from your Jamf instance. And depending upon what your architecture is and how you've created it, you might have different needs than what I had. I'm going to show you what tools I used, what's running through my head when I'm creating this documentation, what's my thought process. We're going to get into how do we gather this information from our Jamf server, how do we assemble this document, and most importantly, how do we get it so it's shareable with other users in our organization. So here you can see this long, detailed document that I created a while ago. It's over 400 pages and over 100,000 words. And it's got a lengthy table of contents, and I go through just about everything you can think of. I go through smart groups, I go through policies, profiles, individual computers, workflows, static groups. So it can be quite lengthy, but it's a lot of detail that can be used as a reference document at some point down the road. I even have a detailed and thought out glossary of terms, definitions that we use throughout the document. And people can get in here and see what this is all about. In this document, what you'll find here is that it's clickable. We have links. So when you go through the table of contents and find something and click on it, it'll take you right to that section within the document. And I will share with you how we create those clickable links, if you will. So some of the tools we use the Jamf Pro Summary Reports, which can be quite comprehensive. We get into the screenshot tool that's built into the macOS. We have Command-Shift-4, which pulls up the tool. But then if you use the space bar, you can take a window screen capture, an entire menu bar, the drop-down menus, whatever you want. And I use Microsoft Word, but if you want to use Pages or some other word processing application, feel free to do that. And then I use Acrobat to get this document converted into a shareable PDF. So what's most important? Well, for me, I've got several colleagues around me that are in VDI Windows environments, and only one other one that's really working extensively in our Jamf organization here. So the organization of how we've put Jamf together might be very different than what they used in Windows. So I wanted to document our workflows and how things were put together. Our naming convention is very unique here at the college. So I wanted to document that process, the policies, the profiles, our smart groups. And so people reading this can understand how things are organized and put together. So when I start this detailed document, I wanted to have what I call a basis of understanding. We have some history here about what our Jamf Pro framework is doing and how we intend to use it to support our Apple ecosystem. But as you notice here, I'm not going to get into how to create a package or a policy or a profile. Those things are described in the Jamf admin guide. And so I have a link pointing to that so people can go to that if they're unfamiliar with that terminology. The other thing I want to do is create that assumption up front that the person reading this should understand some of the macOS terminology. Perhaps they don't understand what the command key is, but you can expect them to have some basis of it, of all the Mac terms. How about IP addresses, scripts, DNS names? All these things can be foreign terms to somebody that's not into the IT technical world. So I want them to understand they should have some background with that before they dive into the document and try to understand what I'm spelling out for them. So our naming convention, here it's highlighted in yellow. And we have M for our main building, but it could be WM for West Madison. Our Reedsburg locations start with an R. Watertown starts with a W. And because it is in the main building, we have a ton of space here. So I designate this as MB, as in our main building B section, and then the room number 3200 indicates it's up on the 3rd floor. And then we do something that's pretty standard. We put our asset information into the name. But then this is where it gets a little bit different than our VDI and Windows systems. I use an M right away to designate this as being a Macintosh system. And after that, AD begins to truncate our names in the Apple environment. So I feel if AD doesn't care, I don't. So I go right into the S for student computer, or an E for an employee computer, and then finally an I for an instructor computer. And the difference between the employee computer and instructor computer is whether or not it's a standalone system or in a instructor station to present on projectors or big screens in a classroom. Then we get into the type of deployment. This is a physics computer, but it could have easily been a chemistry computer or a photo computer, graphic design, biotech, IT, you name it. And because it's a laptop computer, we have a number 3 to indicate it's in the cart number 3 in the physics deployment area. So you can see this name is pretty complex in terms of what it is saying for the computer name. So my workflow is critically dependent upon this computer name, as you just saw a minute ago, but I wanted to capture what we do with that name and the convention that we use with it. So the policies, the profiles, smart groups, they all behave and interact in different ways. But again, the name determines what policies and profiles are going to interact with on that specific computer. So let's gather some data. When we get into the Jamf Pro summary, we have all these checkboxes. And if we're looking at just computers, we see we can check a box for policies. We can check a box for configuration profiles or patch policies, or even pre-stage enrollments. The Jamf Pro summary is where we start collecting all of this data, and we'll get into that here shortly. But when I click on policies in the Jamf Pro summary for computers, it will generate a text document like you see here, and this is viewed in your browser. If it's what you need and what you want, you can then download this as a text file that you can interact with at a later point. So I've recorded a demo here of gathering some of this data. So we go into management settings and we pick on Jamf Pro information. From here, we're going to pick Jamf Pro summary. And as we look through here, I've got computers, I've got mobile devices, I have users, I have system settings and some already pre-checked. I have server infrastructure. I have global management, which pertains to all devices in your Jamf server. Computer management settings. So there are a ton of settings that you can pull this data out from. But in our case, we're going to start with just policies and focus on that. So let's scroll back to the top here, and I'm going to select all, and then unselect all, and choose just policies. And I'm going to click create, and there's our policy page that shows up on our web browser. And you can see here it shows policies. So knowing this is what I want, I'm going to click download. And this is downloading a text file that I can get to later on and use in Word or any other word processing program you want. So once we've downloaded our files, we're going to save them with a descriptive name. In this case, it might be policies, it might be profiles, it might be mobile devices. The naming and what you pull down is completely up to you. This is where I kind of get a little crazy. I throw on the headphones, put on some good music to jam to, and I just start downloading each and every file I might want. And at this point, I can start copying and pasting into my word processing until I'm completely exhausted or just getting bored. Documentation isn't fun, but it's a necessary evil if we want help. We are the subject matter experts for this Jamf server that we put together. Let's share that knowledge with our colleagues so they can be useful to us. So once I have this in our Word document, I can start modifying some of the details that were brought over, and I can keep as much or as little as I would like. So I use a text editor, just plain old text edit, but other people have used TextMate, they've used Text Wrangler, BB Edit. There's a number of other programs. It's up to you what you're comfortable with. But I'm going to copy the elements from this text editor into Microsoft Word and use this as a summary document. And once I've got it in Word, I can format this in just about any way I want. So let's take a look at copying this data over. So I'll open up this text document, and I apologize, this is so tiny to see. But the point is, I can grab this first policy, the first policy, not all of them, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go over to my Microsoft Word program. And inside of Word, I paste this document or this text that I just copied. And I scroll up and I fix the formatting. I change fonts. I change the font size. And then I change some of the indents because it's a little wonky here as it gets brought over. First thing I do is make sure I bold the name of the policy. Then I scroll through and make sure everything else is cleaned up as well. Now, after this has been fixed a little bit, I'm going to want to save this and give it a good descriptive name. We like to make things so it's easy to find later on. And this could be some just for policies, just for profiles. You can call it whatever you want. But now I have this saved. And as you can see where it says name and the policy name, it's in a bold text. I'm going to suggest we use headings for each one of these different policies, and you'll see why shortly. So we're going to repeat this. And again, with your headphones on and jam into some music, you just keep repeating this process. Think of everything you want to document and explain. Think your policies, think your profiles, smart groups, and anything else you want to share with your audience that's going to read this. Then use headings within Word to keep each and every topic separate. And we'll explain why using headings in Word is critical, and you'll see why you're going to want to do that. Entering your thoughts, I tend to tell people, write in a conversational style. If I was sitting down with a colleague like Nate and he's trying to figure out how to add a printer to a Mac, I'm going to walk him through step by step. But at the same time, I might skip something. So when I'm discussing things and I'm watching him click away on the screen, those are the ideas that I want to flow down on paper, each and every step, so it's clear and concise. I think it's absolutely critical to spell everything out. Don't assume anything. Don't assume your reader understands a Mac. Don't assume your reader understands Jamf. Even if they know the Mac, they may not have ever touched Jamf before. So for me, I spell it all out. In this particular document that we are looking at, we did a summary of understanding, a basis of understanding. Well, that spells it out to the reader, but when you're going through, don't just assume everything. Spell it out. Make sure it's in detail so they understand what you're typing. Start and go through each and every step as if you're building something from scratch on a new server. I mentioned about the printer part. When we're on the phone explaining to a customer how to use printers on a Mac and we're telling them how to add a printer, we'll tell them, open your system preferences, go to printer and scanners, and then we'll tell them to unlock the system preference and then click plus to add a printer. But guess what? We just forgot that step of typing in your admin username and password. And if we forget that step, they're going to forget it, and it's going to be troublesome for them to continue. So spell it out. Let them know what they're supposed to do. So capture each and every step that you want to use and ensure that the reader understands what they should be doing. So when we're doing this step by step, we're going to type things out first, and we're going to explain what's happening in that step. And I use a screenshot to demonstrate the words I'm typing. The old adage about a picture being worth 1,000 words is so true. I don't want to type 1,000 words. So if I can capture something in a picture and explain what they're seeing, it's going to be more entertaining for them to read and view and go back to your document often. I tend to use numbers instead of bullet marks. I've seen lots of documentation over the years that's very vague. They have bullet marks, and you're going through and you're reading and you're not sure if you're supposed to go through each step, if it's linear or not. Using numbers, there's no doubt about it. You can't go to step 5 unless you've done step 4. Now, I mentioned using headings. In that example where I bolded the first policy name, I would make that a heading instead. So let's talk about that. Automated workflow breakdown. In my document, I have a heading number 1, for instance, for the automated workflow breakdown that we're seeing. Below that, I have some text describing what that means. Then I get into computer information, which is a subheading of the automated workflow breakdown. And then I have some more text. Headings keep things separate, but yet joined together. So let's do some examples of steps that were written out in Word. Here we have 3 different headings: add local account, binding the computer to AD, and then deploying core applications. Each one of these is a heading and an individual step in my workflow. Then below, I highlight through a screenshot what step that is in our workflow for an individual computer to work on our network. And so you can see the headings separate the items, and then we have our steps, and then we have a screenshot to explain those steps. So I've created this demo for you to show how headers are used in Word. This is a little dry, so I apologize. But the good point is that you're going to see how these headings come to life in a table of contents. So we create our title of this document. Then we go through and we start creating these different headings. And the first heading is going to be a heading 1 called List of Policies Below. And in this case, think of putting your text from your downloaded file from Jamf, and you're going to copy and paste each individual policy into this section using its own heading. So under policies below, we have student policies, and below student policies, we have printer policies for students. And each one of these is a subheading, and we have application policies for students. And again, a heading number 3. Now we're going to want to add some other items, and we're going to call this employee policies. And I'm going to make this a heading number 2. And you'll see why I did this shortly. And under employee policies, you're going to have maybe self-service policies. You might have printer policies, application policies, you name it. Again, this is all dependent upon your infrastructure and how you built it. So we let this type out. And let's throw one more in for good measure. And so under the employee policies, I have application policies for employees. So I have a whole bunch. And now I'm going to just throw some sample text in here just so it breaks up the monotony of the words we've just typed up. But think that this could be like all your text that you're bringing over from your Jamf Pro summary. Now I'm going to build a table of contents. And this table of contents is built based upon the headings you've given it. We go to References, pick Table of Contents, and choose a format, and voila, there we go. So you can see that all of these policies are listed, but because of the use of headings and subheadings, we now build a comprehensive table of contents that's easy to follow along. So we're going to repeat these steps until your documentation is complete. This doesn't have to be done in a day or a week or a month. My document took probably 6 weeks to put together. A lot of copying and a lot of pasting. And I mentioned about proofing and then proofing again. So ask a colleague who's maybe a non-Apple person. I've got a friend that works here. He's, I don't want to say anti-Apple, but Tim is one of those people that does a lot of his own documentation for ServiceNow and his implementation for the help desk. So I ask him periodically to read through just to see if the sections I've built make sense to him. Because after all, if he gets a call from an Apple person and he can reference my document, he's going to refer to it often, and it's going to make sense to him so he can help that user out that's on the phone. I tend to walk or read through my document days or weeks later for clarity. I might think I'm done, and I'll put something away and then intentionally walk away for a few days, and then I'll come back to see if it still makes sense. That's when I usually find I missed a few steps or missed a gap or didn't reveal something that should have been a part of this documentation. Just like I mentioned before in the printer piece, if I'm documenting how to add a printer, I can't forget the fact that they have to have an admin username and password to unlock that system preference to add the printer they need. So if you find that you're missing something, going back through your document weeks later can reveal those items, reveal typos. You can help clean up your document so it makes more sense. So I talk about, can it be read? So I proofed my document. I've had a colleague or two review some of the sections to reveal any missing steps. But I also want to make it conversational. Like I mentioned before, if I'm sitting down with Nate going over how to add a printer, I want that to be a document that he can refer to. It makes sense and it's engaging for him to go back to. I find myself drawn into words that will pique my interest in the document. I just finished a book a couple of weeks ago called The Accidental President about President Harry Truman and how he kind of fell into the position. which then turned me on a book called FDR. Very, very thick book. It's going to take me months to read, but it's interesting. I will go back to it often. If somebody finds your document revealing and interesting, they're going to refer to it. I heard a story a few years ago about Albert Einstein. I don't know if this is true or not, but it is engaging. And that is, he came to New York, and when he got here, several reporters were trying to interview him right away. One of them asked, hey, what's the speed of light? He didn't know. And he said, I have no idea. And they were aghast. They're like, wait a minute. What do you mean you don't know the speed of light? You're like the smartest man alive. How come you don't know that? And he said, I don't need to bother with all of these numbers and figures and clutter up my head with all of this nonsense. He goes, but you know what? I know where it's at. I can refer to that anytime I want. Same thing should be true to your document. If it's true to you and it's true to the colleagues you're working with, they're going to refer to it often, and that's going to make it even more valuable to people. So let's move on here. We've got this section after section, and it's completed. We've got a nice table of contents we want to build on. And this table of contents will be based on those headings you've put into your document. Consider building a glossary of terms. I've had several conversations with people over the years that didn't quite understand what I was dealing with. And yes, I've been at the college over 25 years now, and I'm used to the Apple environment. But we have more Windows and more VDI systems here than we do Apples. So when I have a colleague that's not familiar with the Apple environment, I want to translate that information to something that they're going to be comfortable with and they're going to understand. I used a phrase a few years ago when we started using APFS drives on our Macs, and we started wiping those drives with the Start OS install command. It's a remote command that we can trigger from our computer to all of our labs. We can even trigger remotely when they're not even on our network. But the point is that there wasn't a real good term that was coined that I liked to refer to that process. Now I refer to that process as OS recovery. If we're going to recover that OS, people that are in the Apple environment will understand what I'm referring to, but I want to build it into my glossary of terms so people understand. Years ago, and this is embarrassing, but it's funny and I'm going to share it. Years ago, when I first broke into the technology environment, I was working with a law firm near where our store was, and they had a computer that wasn't getting on the network properly. So I contacted our support guy back at the office, and he said, well, what's the MAC address? And I looked at him. I said, well, it's 1701 West Main Street. And he paused and he's like, what? I said, yeah, that's where it's located. He shook his head and he's like, no, that's not what I'm referring to. And he went on to explain what MAC address was. And think about it. If you're in a Windows environment and somebody says, what's the MAC address? Well, you don't work on Apples, so MAC would not refer to a Mac. But there's going to be people that are fairly new to the Apple environment, and if they've not heard that term, you better spell it out for them. So be clear and concise in your glossary. I think it's important for them to be on the same page with you. So let's build a table of contents. That table of content is built from those headings. Here we have history, we have assumptions and understandings, we have an automated workflow, and then the subheadings below that. So let's talk about getting those headings and moving into a document that can be converted into a PDF that you can use. So we know that we can save a lot of items in our Mac pretty quickly as a PDF. But the problem with just saving it as a PDF on your Mac through Word or some other program, it won't always preserve the links or hyperlinks that you built so long, took so long to build inside of Word, especially your table of contents. So I convert using Acrobat because Acrobat will preserve the formatting and links that you've created. So I've got this recorded demo of converting this major document into a PDF. Because it does take a while, I've taken this converting document video and cut off some of the pieces for time's sake. So here's this architecture document in Word. I can click on policies and go directly to the section, and that works great. That's exactly what we're looking for. But if I do File and then Print, and in the print window, I pull up Save as PDF, I can save it to my desktop. It takes a few seconds because this is a pretty hefty document. Then we're going to go to our desktop and find that newly saved PDF file. We'll open it up in preview, scroll through it, and it looks great. Everything's there, table of contents. But when I click on policies, it's just clicking on the items. It's not actually going anywhere. So let's use Acrobat. We'll go to File, Open, and we're going to say Show All Files. Find my Word document and click Open. This converts it into a portable document that we can use within Acrobat. When I click on Policies, it takes me directly to the section. Acrobat understands what it's supposed to do. Now, we can export this file out to just about any other format, but in this situation, I definitely want to save this as PDF. Find the location, give it a correct name, and click Save. Now, this takes a little bit of time, and I've shortened the steps up. But now, let's open up that new PDF. In preview, you can see it's all here. Click on Policies, it takes me directly to the section, and the PDF is now formatted in a way that I can use and share with other people. So let's review what we just did. We looked at what things to document, and the Jamf Pro summary can pull up just about all of it. I mentioned about what tools I've used. I mentioned what's going through my head. What are my thought processes behind this? And I shared how to gather this information from the Jamf Pro summary. We assembled the document inside of Word, and then we created a shareable document. And that document now can be shared with the world if you want, all your colleagues, managers, other people outside your organization. If they're new coming in, they want to see what you've done. It's up to you. But now you've got a shareable document. I want to thank you for listening and watching along. There's a survey that I'd like you to complete. Use the widget below here to get there. I do want to take a moment here and say on a personal note, you know, back in the early spring, we talked about having this conference in San Diego, and we were all, you know, just like the rest of the world, shocked with COVID going around and changing everything about our lives, masks, our workplace, our conference. But it's this upending turmoil, it doesn't appear to be ending anytime soon. So with that, I want you each to be safe. Take care of your families, and may the best be with you for the rest of this year and going into next year. Thank you.